Welcome back, friends, to Utah Stories. So I am joined today with J.P. Bernier. He is the founder and owner of Hammer Spring Distillery. We're going to talk about his Made in Utah story. And J.P., thanks for joining me.
Great to be here. Good afternoon.
So you started this business back in 2016. That was when there were a lot of distilleries, opening around that time. Was that really competitive and hard to get in, or was that difficult to get everything passed to get your licenses and everything you needed at that time?
You know, we had seen a rapid kind of an outbreak, if you will, of distilleries since 2007 in the few years following that. And we kind of got the idea that if we're going to get into this, we should do it sooner than later. We didn't come in with really a lot of marketing money or a lot of development money. We didn't really have any interest in leveraging things. We wanted to go cash forward. So we knew that if we didn't start out earlier on, then we'd just get buried in the flood of what inevitably was to become more and more distilleries that we have. So we're number 14 in the state.
All right.
And I think, gosh, I don't even know the number now. Maybe there's like 22 or 24. I could be way off. But there's more than 14 now.
Yeah. And what was it about Utah and the market here that made you want to start here? Was it just because you already lived here, or?
We already lived here, yeah. So my wife and I, we grew up here. So it wasn't like we had explored it from somewhere else. It was, how do we do this thing where we already are?
Mm-hmm. And have you maintained full-time jobs while you're doing this, or were you able to take the full plunge, or how did you do it?
So, yeah, my wife and I, we both have, she has a full-time gig on the side. She's a MBA CPA. She's a very brilliant, bright woman. And she made me the deal when we started. She says, you've got 5 years to make this work and I'll pay the bills. And if it doesn't, you can't just abandon me with this. So we've gone a bit and we've done all right. I kept a little side hustle on the side. I got some really good advice when I first started to not quit my full-time jam.
Yeah.
And so that has helped bridge the gaps here and there.
It seems like when you start small and you have to grow organically rather than through some giant marketing campaign.
Right.
That's really got to be the way to go.
Right. There's maybe you've heard this before, and this isn't my own quote. I got somebody else told me this, and I wish I could credit them with it, but I can't remember who it was. Maybe if they're listening, they'll call and tell me, hey, that was me. But there's two different types of distilleries in the industries. There's marketing companies with a distilling problem, and then there's distilleries with a marketing problem. And we fall into the latter category.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I don't want to call out these distilleries that just are doing marketing.
Right. But they're out there, and that's, the world is full of them, and that's fine. That's their thing. It's their model. It's their business model. But it's different than what we do.
So are you doing grain to glass?
We do. We have 2 grain to glass products. Our potato vodka, which technically that's a farm to glass because potato is not a grain, obviously, right? But our bourbon is fully grain to glass. We mill the grains ourselves, do all the fermentation, the distillation, the barreling, the bottling, everything in our shop.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a ton of work. That's a huge amount of labor, isn't it?
It is. It's pretty labor intensive.
Yeah. Do you still enjoy it?
Mostly. There's parts of it that I like more than others.
Do you have a big mill, or do you have to work with a smaller mill?
Well, I guess that's kind of subjective. From the home hobby level, it's probably a big mill, but on the industrial scale, it's quite small. It'll do a 5-gallon bucket, roughly size of, so for my batch of bourbon, it's about 300 pounds, and it takes me about 2 hours to do that. So it's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a brand new startup distillery that he decided to go with a massive, huge mill, and I was thinking, God, you didn't have something like pretty big. You're spending a ton of your time milling, and then you're what kind of bothers me is like the FDA is so specific about packaging of food products. But then when you get to the liquor stores, you don't see any specificity on what's grain to glass, what's produced from, the 50-gallon drums of just, I guess it's neutral grain alcohol that you can buy.
Right.
And you just can't tell, and it's not packaged, and it's not labeled any different. And why is that?
I'm certainly not a legal expert, and I don't know a lot about the FDA. Generally, the alcohol production in the United States is not governed by the FDA. It's governed by the Tax and Trade Bureau, or the TTB.
Yeah, it's a completely different entity.
And they put forth the requirements for our labeling. We get what's called a Certificate of Label Authorization, or a COLA, right? So we have to submit our design, and there's certain things you can say and certain things you can't say. You can't make any claims of medicinal healing. You can't make magical claims, things like this. So if Red Bull had alcohol in it, they'd never be able to say it gives you wings, right? That's like a forbidden thing in the alcohol industry. Mm-hmm. So they have kind of a different approach to their packaging requirements than the FDA.
Yeah. And have you struggled getting good placement in the liquor stores in Utah?
Oh, for sure. All the local people have that same struggle.
Yeah.
And we kind of get the same song and dance from the state that, well, your numbers are low. And, the common response is, well, I've only got 2 or 3 shelves. Of course, my numbers are going to be low. Give me more shelves and I'll give you bigger numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had James from Sugar House Distillery on just saying that the new inventory management system that the DAVC is using is the same model that Walmart is using, and all they're trying to examine is bottle turns, as if that's the king. Like that's the greatest virtue they can have in their stores, is just turning bottles. But if under that mindset, it just seems like, why wouldn't you just fill your whole store full of Barton's vodka and Captain Morgan rum and throw out all of the local distilleries?
It's true. That sentiment seems to come from both sides of the state's mouth, right? At one point, they indicate that they want to curb excessive alcohol consumption or underage drinking, but at the same time, they still sell that $8 bottle of plastic bottle of Barton's, right? So if that was really a concern, then get rid of that altogether.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all.
Right.
If you're banning, like I think it was now probably 10 years ago, they banned Alka-Pops. They said you can't have anything like Bartles and James wine coolers, mm-hmm. or anything that's going to be like a date rape type thing. And then we moved 10 years into the future, and they are prioritizing bottle turns of plastic vodka.
Right.
And it's like, if you've ever been to like a frat party or anything like that, that's going to be the what makes the jungle juice.
They're not getting lit on $45 bottles of bourbon.
No. Yeah. And it's like, I was raised Mormon, and I think one of the things that you first encounter when you get out of the Mormon circle is that, yeah, people like to party and get drunk, but if you learn more about liquor and you educate yourself, you begin to find out, if you go with a higher quality liquor and a higher quality product, you're less likely to get hangovers because you're less likely to be drinking the heads or the tails of that distilled product. And so in your process, can you explain what that means, like the heads and the tails of distilling?
Sure. So when you ferment grain, there's trace amounts of toxins that are made during that fermentation process. And you can kind of go down into the weeds with it, and a lot of it depends on what the temperature of your fermentation is. If it's too hot or too cold, it can have an effect on this thing. Ultimately, what you end up with is a little bit of methanol, which is very toxic to human beings. This is why the hangover headache is different than other headaches. So in mammals, methanol binds to the optic nerve. So when you feel like you get that like right behind your eyes kind of hangover headache, you're literally, the methanol is trying to dissolve your optic nerve. That's why it sucks. So this happens naturally during the fermentation process. And if you have problems with temperature, you're also at risk for something called 2-propanol, which is otherwise known as isopropyl, which is a hydrolyzed version of acetone. So all of these like terrible things can come during the fermentation process if you don't do it really carefully. Fortunately, in the distilling world, methanol has a lower boiling point than ethanol, which is the food-grade alcohol that we can safely consume. So when you make batch spirits or craft spirits in small batches, what you're doing is you're starting your process cold. And as your boiler starts to heat up, these higher volatile toxins are going to boil off first. So the first bits of alcohol that come off the still, these are your heads or your feints. And we have a diversion valve on the collection parrot thing. And so we can change that valve after the heads have flown to divert it into the other container where we catch the hearts, which is the good stuff.
That's cool. Yeah, I've seen that done, and it's just like if you don't understand the science behind it, or you're trying to maximize the volume of the spirit, you're gonna lead to people going blind and dumb.
It's true. Right.
It's just
And there's not a lot of the heads that come off. It's not really a lot. So, if you don't separate those off, you're not really gaining much actual alcohol content. You're just leaving junk in there that makes people sick.
yeah. So where are you guys located again?
We are at 3697 West, 1987 South, and that is just on the north side of the 201 freeway. So just kind of in between the 3200 West and the Bangor Highway exit off the 201.
Cool. And do you do tours there?
Absolutely, Wednesday through Saturday in the afternoons.
Nice. Yeah, well, let's give it a try. I have not tried this barrel finished gin, and I promised Troy we'll pour him something. I did.
All right, well, you're in for a treat. Are you familiar with our gin that's not barrel finished?
I am.
So
yep.
to differentiate, we just kind of refer to that as our silver gin.
Yeah.
So this is a softer, little bit more complex version of that. It's the same recipe. I like to point out that we use the exact same botanicals. The only difference with this is we put it in a used whiskey barrel for 8 months. And the interaction with the oak and the charring on the inside of the barrel and the little bit of the whiskey that was in there previously has quite a profound impact on the taste of the gin compared to the silver gin.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow.
So
That's very nice.
You'll
man.
find a bit softer version than the other gin, and you'll find a little bit of a vanilla finish to it. Maybe a little bit of a whiskey note going on there, and maybe a little bit of the oak from the barrel.
It's really quite smooth. Like I expected it to be fire going down. But does the barrel process mellow it out too?
It definitely does smooth it out. When we distill our gin, we use a fractioning column for it as well, or a reflux column as it's sometimes called. So after the spirit has already been made, we put it through an additional 7 plates when we make the gin. So it smooths it out even more than what we started with. And then it goes in the barrel. So you've got some of that, cleaning up effect that happens inside the barrel with it also.
Wow. And what do you use do you use juniper berries for the
Yeah, so alcohol has rules, like bourbon has a rule and tequila has a rule and champagne has a rule, right? That's kind of where they get their names. But with gin, the rule with gin is that it has to have juniper berries in it as part of the foundation. Now, we're not fermenting the juniper berries. We're adding the juniper berries into a spirit that's already been distilled, the way we do it anyway. And what we're after is the essential oil that's in those juniper berries. And so we're going to use a selection of other botanicals as well, but we're after the flavors and the fragrances of those botanicals and mixed together with that neutral spirit. When we redistill that, what comes out the other end is gin.
So by neutral spirit, is it basically just a rum, or is it a vodka, or
it can be it can be made from any particular grain. So if you want to make it from sugar or corn or wheat, that part doesn't really matter.
Cool. Well, it's a great product. Yeah, I just can't tell people how much better you feel and how much better you support the local economy and local jobs when you buy local liquor. I mean, it's I guess cheaper, easier to find these big giant corporate liquors, but we started drinking only local liquor about 5 years ago, and the selection in Utah and the quality of the product, especially as you get a little bit older and you're more sensitive to hangovers.
Sure. And a little bit more discerning.
Yeah, it just makes a huge difference. So yeah,
we have lots of local favorites. I mean, there's one of the really great things about the Utah distilling scene is the diversity. It's kind of like, well, whatever you want, somebody's making it, right? If you want absinthe, go to Holy Stone. If you want cherry liqueur, go to New World. If you want, really great bourbon, come see us or James at Sugar House. If you want cinnamon whiskey, go to Ogden Zone. If you want, on and on and on, right? You could get Beehive does a really great floral gin, where ours is more of a savory gin. So there's kind of, something out there for everybody.
Yeah, it's great that you guys all kind of work together. You're not, like basically diminishing each other. You're all propping each other up, and I think
I hope that everybody shares that same sentiment. I don't know that we always do, but it's really part of I don't know, my character is to not disparage, I mean, they're my competition, but they're also my peers in the industry. So a rising tide raises all ships. So like, why would we be shitty with each other,
Yeah, no kidding. If now working in this business for, coming up on 8 or 9 years, what would be the one liquor law you'd want to see changed in Utah?
Wow, that's a good question. Just one.
I guess you could say top 3.
Top 3.
There's so many wacky liquor laws in Utah.
Okay, so the one that really is my pet peeve is that you can't stand up with a drink in a club, right? Like, why not be able to just go carry your drink to wherever and watch the band? Or, if you're on a patio and they sit you in the shade, why can't you stand up and go stand in the sun, right? It's like the most ridiculous thing. What is this hurting? One of the things that we in the distiller industry complained about was that we were constrained to the same operating hours as the DABS stores. And recently that's gone away. So now we can be open on Sundays. We can be open on holidays. We can, kind of keep our own hours. And that was a really big landmark victory for us to be able to say, because it never made any sense, right? Because we don't have state employees in our stores and they don't have anything to do with it except the taxes we pay. So it never made sense. So that was a good one. Another one that we would change. I think some of the proximity rules for manufacturers are a little tighter than they need to be. It makes it really difficult to be in a pedestrian retail area. I know some people have kind of gotten around this with bars and restaurants and stuff, but we're kind of out in the industrial wasteland because we had to meet that proximity rule and still find some place where we could afford rent.
So you have to be how far from a church, or what is the problem?
So what the proximity is to something called a public space, and so this is a park, a school, a church, a library, a playground, these types of things. And it's, if I remember correctly, it's 600 feet. Which may sound like, well, obviously you can't be in a residential neighborhood because there's a church every 600 feet, which that's hyperbole, but you get my drift. But what we found, which is really interesting, starting to look through the industrial parks, there's a lot of little tiny churches all over the place in these industrial parks because rent's cheap, right? So we probably went through a half a dozen of these places when we first were looking for property. And we're like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. There's a little church right next door. Who knew, right? So we're constantly frustrated with that.
What happens if you open up and a church opens up next to you?
Yeah, too bad. So sad for them. So we were there first.
Okay. They grandfather that
in. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I was trying to think who was telling me. I think it was Dented Brick. They told me they had to move their door. No, it was actually Ogden's Own. They had to move their door because they measure by the door.
Right.
And is it as the crow flies, or is it like around the corner? It's
the pedestrian route.
Okay, so that you don't have to go as the crow flies. That's probably a little bit of advantage.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I think I think it's awesome what you're doing. It's commendable that you can do what you do here in Utah, and you can make it happen. And
Utah gets a bad rap, but most of the states in the country are control states. So depending where you go, there's always going to be something. I don't think there's any mecca of alcohol manufacturing. I don't know, except maybe Montana. They don't seem to have a lot of rules in Montana, but they also have long winters. So, kudos to everybody who distills in Montana. But
when you say controlled state, what is that? You said most states are controlled states. What does that entail?
So that's where the state takes control of the distribution and sale and manufacturing of alcohol.
I didn't know most states were that.
Yeah, I think there's only a few that don't have that.
Huh.
So there's some places even, and so this comes from when Prohibition ended back in the 30s, and a lot of this, so the federal government turned over a lot of stuff to the states for the sale anyways. Not so much the whatever, but the sale of it. They're like, here you go, states, make your own rules. And some states, like Texas, for example, they're like, well, we don't want to deal with this, so we're going to turn it to the counties. Kentucky, I believe, is the same way. So that's why you still have dry counties in the United States, is because they just have chose to continue the pre-prohibition era rules.
That's interesting. Yeah, and so I guess all of Utah was dry as far as liquor manufacturing was concerned until about 1989 when they allowed brew pubs, right? Microbreweries, and then
So far from the manufacturing side, perhaps. I mean, we weren't dry, right? You could still buy beer or alcohol from the state stores. You know,
Yeah,
they
just
didn't
dry
put
as far as production, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I think 2007 was when High West got their first DSP.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's very cool. What is your day job? Or what are your side gigs that you do?
Gosh, I've done a handful of things. Since 1994, I've been a design architect, and so I keep a little bit of that on the side. I love doing architectural projects. I have a handful of contractors that just feed me work on the regular, so that's kind of nice to do. I spent maybe 10 years doing a lot of volunteer but some paid pre-hospital emergency care as a paramedic.
Wow, way cool.
Yeah, so there was a lot of shared vocabulary with that, with the biology and a little bit of the organic chemistry that translates to distilling. So when I started learning about that process, a lot of it was like, oh, hey, I already know like how to do this, or at least academically, I know what it means.
That's cool. That's quite a variety of
it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, I think when people are considering like starting their own business, they've had something like a government job, like we've got these friends, and they're about to get out of academia. They tend to think like, oh man, I'm never going to be able to make it. How am I going to, like, they want to start it. They've started this amazing bakery out in Teasdale. And we're just like, you just take the plunge, and as you need to get side jobs, there's always people who want to hire hard workers. You guys are hard workers. Yeah. I don't think you're going to have any trouble. And
there's a lot to be said for the entrepreneurial spirit. I'm about 3/4 of the way through a business degree right now as well, doing school on the side on top of everything else. And as I progress through this, I think, gosh, I wish I would have done this before starting my own business. Mm-hmm. And not that it would have changed my mind, but it would have helped me structure things a lot better, and it taught me things about the business world that I didn't really know when I started. And I just think every day I'm like, how did I make it? How did I get around these obstacles and these hurdles without really knowing what they even were? So I don't know.
Yeah, the finance end of things I was completely ignorant on, and then you like hear that title CFO, and that's almost the same level as the CEO. But then once you realize how hard it is to make payroll sometimes, and how important it is to have cash flow and maintain that cash flow, you understand why the finance component is so critical
sure.
to keeping the business.
Previously in my architectural career, I had a design drafting studio, and we had quite a few people. We had an outsourced staff of 30, and then we had an in-house staff of 8 of us. So I, like, my HR and my cash flow and payroll and all those things was like pretty solid on that. But I had never manufactured anything before. The cost of goods sold, what the heck is that, right? Why do I need to know what my, accounts receivable and my accounts payable have to have this certain relationship? And it was always just felt like I was kind of winging it, and flying by the seat of my pants. But so finally feeling a little bit smarter about that.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, I think that's about it. Thanks so much for coming on,
this
JP.
has been a blast. Always love hanging out and doing these things. Thanks for the toast.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have a little bit more. This is just awesome, man. I've never had barrel aged gin. I can highly recommend it. Can you find this at all Salt Lake liquor stores or
not anymore? It used to be there, but
your place.
But you can get it at the distillery. Yeah.
Nice. Tell me that address again. And
3697 West, 1987 South.
And is it just hammerspringdistillery.com or
Distillers?
Distillers.
Yeah,
Hammerspring Distillers.
So the website is just hammerspring.com.
Oh, okay. Hammerspring.com.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Pick up the new issue of Utah Stories magazine if you haven't seen it. And if you want to subscribe, go out to utahstories.com, and we will send it to your door for $3 a month. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Cheers.